Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by Inside the Birds podcast. It drops at 6 a.m. every Monday and Thursday. Check out their YouTube channel, and it is brought to you by Philly Sports Trips. If you're a diehard Philly fan who's looking for some great Philly sports road trips, it's time to check out the full trip lineup at phillysportstrips.com. Geoff Mosher, he is the owner, he is the purveyor of the site InsideTheBirds.com. And he is with me. What are you eating? Sunflower seeds over there, dude?
No, it was a little gum. I just had to remove it before the interview.
All right.
You don't want to hear me all, so
he is the owner and the purveyor, the man who eats sunflower seeds, spitting gum before of InsideTheBirds.com. It is Geoff Mosher. All right, Mosher, what's up, brother?
What's up, my friend? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk some football. I mean, people look at the offseason here and see what's next. We got minicamp coming up this weekend. We'll dive into some of that and a lot of the storylines that we're looking forward to. But I want to get into something that you wrote about over at InsideTheBirds.com and, the impact of all these front office moves. I mean, by most accounts, the Eagles did a good job at the draft. They've had a nice weekend. Why so many changes? Give us the skinny on what's happening inside the Eagles front office.
Yeah, Mike, the Eagles are undergoing some pretty big changes. We've talked about the losses that they've already had, right? Brandon Brown, Ian Cunningham, Brandon going to the Giants, Cunningham going to the Bears. Those were two very high-ranking executives in their scouting chain. Catherine Ra&acirc, we've talked about her, the highest-ranking woman in the NFL. Is going to be going to the Browns to be like an assistant GM type role. And then there have been moves now made in the last few days that reflect that not only did the Eagles have to replace some really qualified candidates that they're losing, but that they're also going in a different direction as far as their department altogether. And when I say different, what I mean is the sense I get and just speaking and seeing the moves and talking to some people who are familiar with what the Eagles are doing is that they're trying to be younger, trying to continue to have a diverse staff, racially diverse staff. That's always been important. Jeffrey Lurie's been talking about that for the last few years, and their moves have reflected that. And it seems to me, and I've got more work to do, and Adam does on this, that they're sort of, the way it was put to me is like they don't want to be like the status quo anymore, or they don't want to do it the way it's always been done. They're trying to, I guess, maybe more modernize or be more forward-thinking in their scouting approach. So you'll notice that some of the scouts who were fired or not retained have been scouts for a long time, like Sean Heinlein, the Southwest scout. He is a guy that's been in scouting for about almost 20 years. TJ McCrate as well, a guy who's been a veteran scout for a long time. The Casey Weidel one, to me, Mike, is the one that it's hard to see the messaging or understand what's going on there because he's young. He's kind of a dynamic guy as far as what he does, and he speaks. People who know him, who have worked with him, speak really highly of his what he does in his job. Well, he is a kind of a scheduler and organizer. There are a lot of behind-the-scenes guys in scouting that do more than just watch tape. Like they're responsible for taking the whole pool of college players, right? If it's College Scout, and then the whole pool of scouts in your organization and making sure everybody is aligned. You go to the combine, you got to interview a certain amount of people. They're spread out. They're at certain times. Like Casey was responsible for a lot of the functionality there. That's what his title was, scouting director, or I forget, coordinator, I think. And it's my understanding he will wind up getting a job because he's that well regarded. So the fact that he's out and that he's Andy Weidel's brother certainly raises up your radar and says, well, that's kind of an interesting one. What's going on here? But as we reported, and Adam Kaplan reported it on our podcast, it's our understanding Andy Weidel is staying in the front office for now, as long as he's employed here. So.
Right. I mean, Andy Weidel obviously is a candidate for the Steelers job, but how awkward of a situation it's going to be if he's still here and his brother just got canned.
Yeah, very awkward. And, the Steelers are casting a wide net. They're interviewing a lot of people, but they are generally known around the league as a team that promotes from within, and they have some strong interior candidates. One of them who's going to interview with the Eagles this weekend, Brandon Hunt. To say that he's the front runner, Andy Weidel, for the job, or he's definitely getting it, and that's why they're just making moves now to be ahead of the game is completely false. That's not the case going on here.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess let me rewind a little bit here too. Catherine Ra&acirc, she's going to Cleveland by all reports. She interviewed in Minnesota. I don't know that a lot of our listeners have any idea who she is or what she does, but what impact does she have on the organization, or what did she do and her leaving?
Right. So she holds the title of director of football operations, I believe, or football administration. It's the same title that Andrew Berry, I believe, held with the Eagles before he became the Cleveland Browns GM. So it's a title that is a high-ranking title and entails a lot of, important decisions for the franchise. And as I understand it, her job blends a lot of different responsibilities, from scouting to coordinating to, being a high-profile decision maker on the team. And she is going to fill the role that is left void by Kwesi Mensah, and I'm bad at pronouncing his last name. He left Cleveland to be the general manager now of the Vikings. So Andrew Berry is replacing him by hiring Catherine Ra&acirc, or in some kind of capacity where it's a very high-ranking position in the Browns system. Oh. So that's losing her. Now remember, Catherine. A lot of people, like you said, a lot of people don't know who Catherine is. She's the highest-ranking woman for any NFL team. And she came here 3 years ago from the Canadian Football League, where she had been an assistant general manager, I believe, for the Argonauts, and a director of football administration for the Alouettes. So she held very high positions there, was hired by the Eagles as like a player personnel executive, and then 2 years later was promoted to what she is currently doing.
Was she helping with like draft, scouting, giving information on players? Like, sometimes, if you're a GM of, say, a minor league baseball team, your job is not as much finding talent as much as it is doing sales. What was her role in terms of that? Is she more on the player personnel side, or is she more on the business side?
No, it's definitely player personnel. It was not business. Like President Don Smolenski, as you're pointing out, whose name you hear sometimes, he's the president of the team, but as mostly a business and operation for him. But Catherine is a football operation.
So this is somebody who's
like
helping.
I said, she does scouting, she does tape watch, she does some contracts, player development, football research, their analytics, which they are very big on, as you know. So it's a pretty all-encompassing position that she held.
Right. You mentioned Brandon.
But not business. She's not out there selling.
Right. Just to let people know, this is somebody that helped with this draft class and this offseason that they are now losing. And it's multiple people in the front office they have lost. We talked about this briefly before, but what does that say about the Eagles front office that they keep getting poached?
Yeah. I mean, in this case, there's really one person getting poached on top of the two that they've already lost, and that's Catherine. The others are team decisions to move on. So,
some of the I'm saying that Brandon Brooks looked attractive, and that other teams, they had like 4 interviews inside this front office of other teams coming to them and saying, "Hey, you have somebody we're interested in."
Sure. No, I mean, there's certainly that. That's absolutely true. It's case by case because some of these things are relationships. Andy Weidel came here because Joe Douglas came here, right? Joe Douglas hired Andy Weidel because they worked together in Baltimore, and then both of them together have brought in several scouts who came through the Baltimore chain. So some of it is that. Like, for example, Ian Cunningham, who was well regarded, to your point, he and Ryan Poles had a prior relationship. They knew each other. They were very friendly with each other. So for Ryan, it was understandable why he interviewed Ian. He wanted him in the organization. I think your point about the Giants hiring of Brandon Brown is really valid, because I don't know that there was any kind of prior relationship between Joe Schoen and Brandon Brown. I think that they were really just looking for a really qualified AGM and came to this organization and found one.
Yeah, and there's also, I guess, reports out there that the Senior Bowl director, Jim Nagy, is up for a front office position. You lost Cunningham. You've lost Brown. Rach is now leaving. It seems like the Eagles have a lot of moves to make. This is going to be, as you kind of indicated, a much different look in that front office. And one of the things about having a successful front office is the stability that they've had. You may not like Roseman, you have whatever thoughts of Roseman, but having the stability and consistency at that position, whether he makes good decisions or not, that's what typically good teams do. They have consistency in those positions.
Yeah, and that's what makes some of the recent moves sort of confusing. You can't control who gets lost. I mean, obviously, but
well, the Eagles are trying to, right? Well, didn't they put the rule in that they don't want?
They are trying to. You're right. Yeah, they did. But that part you can't control. But I've criticized them in the past for being, sort of the team that hires and fires like different guys in the front office every 2 or 3 years, and Howie Roseman's had his issues getting along with certain personnel, and that's always impacted the team's ability to have like a constant identity. And it seemed, as you're saying, like things were starting to settle itself out from the 2 drafts of 2 and 3 years ago that just went haywire. And they're coming off 2 drafts that are generally recognized as being good process, good players. And so to kind of do this now makes you wonder, like, what reason would you have for some kind of sudden philosophical shift in what you're doing? And that's the only way we'll get that answer is down the road as this thing becomes successful, or if the lack of continuity winds up hurting them in the long run. We'll have to see. But I mean, the one thing about Howie, I mean, he's going to look for the best in the business. And, Brandon Hunt from the Steelers has been with the Steelers for quite a while. Pro scouting coordinator. He's a guy who, as I understand it, is up for that GM vacancy in Pittsburgh. And he's also someone that the Eagles have been kind of having their eye on ever since Chip Kelly was the not just the head coach, but he had the power, and he was looking for a right-hand man kind of executive. He wound up hiring Doug Manowitz, or promoting Doug Manowitz, but he did cast a wide net, and guys like Joe Douglas and Brandon Hunt were on the radar at the time. So this is several years later, and Brandon Hunt is now coming in to impress himself upon Howie, and it's my understanding Howie likes the guy a lot. So we'll see. I mean, and he's younger, he's an African American, so he's going in the direction the way Jeffrey Lurie and Howie want, as far as having a younger, diverse, and I guess forward-thinking. So I don't know if Brandon Hunt's a forward-thinking guy the way the Eagles want. Who knows? But he's a qualified and talented executive from people I speak to.
Geoff Mosher, InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds podcast. Check out their website and more for more information on who some of the names that could be out there and who the Eagles could be targeting, because obviously they got a lot of changes coming to their front office. Now, the front office had been lauded this weekend for the moves they made. The big one is A.J. Brown. He spoke the other day. You guys had the Intel show with Greg Cosell on, and you can check that out on the YouTube channel for those of you out there who like those Intel shows with Greg Cosell. What is something about A.J. Brown that he said that maybe our listeners would, can kind of gravitate towards about the way he fits in with this team?
Yeah, the money quote, as I like to call it. And Greg doesn't normally get into hyperbole much. He just tells you what he sees on tape. But he was extraordinarily enthusiastic about how A.J. Brown, quote, fits the Eagles like a freaking glove, end quote. That is what he said. And I was like, thank you for the headline. But it's true. I mean, A.J. Brown is someone who, he's only 6'1", but he's 220 pounds. He's kind of built differently than the receivers that you see around the league, right? He's not 6'2", 6'3", 220, which is normal. So at 6'1", 220, what he does best is really flourish in the short to intermediate game, and then take that pass, turn upfield, break through some contact, and give you a lot of run after the catch. A lot of that is RPO, that short stuff, that slant, the glance routes. That's all stuff that he's done really well in Tennessee, and it's stuff that Nick Sirianni tried to do for the first few weeks of the season before he realized that that wasn't a good game plan for what they were at the time, and then he had to go to a running game in a run-based scheme with the quarterback runs. But it's clear now when you look at how they chased after wide receiver and what they paid A.J. Brown and gave up to get him, that they do want to pass the ball more, and they want to be a better passing team. They want to be what you see around the NFL. So when you bring in A.J. Brown and pay him that money, and you bring in a guy who particularly fits that short game and West Coast offense and quick stuff that you want to do, then it makes a whole lot of sense. And that to surmise that they're going to try to get back to being what they were the first 6 weeks, just with a lot better results.
Yeah. We got mini camps starting this weekend, and I know a lot of people sometimes say, hey, these mini camps, you don't take a lot out from it, but what are some of the things, Geoff, that you are going to take in with the mini camp starting this weekend?
Well, I'm still fascinated, probably like everybody else, that Nakobe Dean is just good to go, right? I mean, so we'll see
What'd you think of his quote, though? I mean, he was pretty, he said, somebody basically cost me money. Like, somebody put something out there that's not true, and it cost me money.
Yeah, I don't get that, and I don't know what he's been told. Maybe, when you're a top 40 guy and you fall to the third round, maybe your agent's got to come up with something to tell you, or I don't know what. But I talked to several people, and they, a lot of people would tick off the litany of injuries that he had suffered. Now, granted, he didn't miss time at Georgia, but, there are a lot of guys, Alabama was pretty famous for this for a while, and still so that, players come from there and they're great, but they've either had, off-season medicals or something, and then they go to the NFL and they fall apart pretty quickly. From D. Milner to like a couple of their linebackers, and Trent Richardson was never very effective. I don't know if it was injury related, but a lot of their guys wind up getting hurt. Who's the wide receiver from Alabama who was always getting hurt too? I can't remember. But the point is, when I talked to people around the league about Nakobe Dean, they would list off certain medical question marks they had about him. And even at his pro day, I was told he just didn't work out and test well, and you could tell that he was trying to push through whatever injuries he had going on, whether it was the pec or something else. So he's already 5'11", right? He's not the tallest guy. He's not the biggest guy. And now you've got medical question marks on him. So maybe third round's a little too much precipitous of a fall, but I don't know why he's surprised, knowing his own medical history and what teams knew about it, that he fell out of the first and second round.
Well, obviously they don't. These mini camps are basically shorts and T-shirts, and I guess you have your helmet on, right? There's nothing crazy going on, but it'll definitely be, I think, anyway. Do you think Reagor is there and he does anything?
Well, he's not a rookie, so
this is for the rookies
now.
This is for the rookies only?
I thought it was just rookie minicamp first, and then they changed up the schedule a lot. So
they have, and some of these OTAs, I guess, later on is when the veterans come in. Gotcha. Right. I was gonna say, because I'm looking forward to see. I talked about this yesterday, Moshe. I want to get your opinion on this. The whole Reagor thing. Obviously, everybody's sour on him, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you the guy is going to break out and have a great year. But Aguilar had 2 horrible years. And then they moved him exclusively to the slot, and he was a big part of them winning that Super Bowl. If the Eagles just change Reagor's role, I wonder if that's something that, hey, you're not we're 2 years past you being the first pick. We got Smith and Brown here. The spotlight is off you. Let's just throw you in the slot and see if he can, run some curls, catch the ball, turn, and get up the field.
Right. So I think the only difference is, because I thought this too, like at the end of the year, I'm like, maybe if they move Reagor to the slot, there'll be more of an opportunity to kind of get his confidence back, resurrect his career. He's a short area burst guy who can turn it upfield anyway. But the difference is, when Aguilar moved to the slot, if you looked at the totem pole of the offense at the time, it was still Zach Ertz number 1 as far as volume catcher. You could say Alshon 2, but Aguilar was 3. I think Torrey Smith was the 4th guy in that. Aguilar got way more of attention from Carson Wentz, who also played at an incredible level when the first 2 years, or those years Aguilar was good. In this case, you look at where Reagor falls. Like, you've got A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith, and you have Dallas Goedert. So you already have 3 guys above him in the pecking order, and Quez Watkins is a guy that they've spoken about with one more praise, so you might as well just say they've got 4 guys above him in the pecking order. So he won't have the same opportunities right now to resurrect his career as Nelson Aguilar did, because when this team comes out in 11 personnel with 3 receivers on the field, it doesn't sound like Jalen Reagor is part of that crew for the moment.
Fair enough.
It's a little bit more an uphill climb for him.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to come out and catch. I don't know what Aguilar did, but he had a pretty big impact. I mean, he had a big Super Bowl. I mean,
Yes.
He really had a big season. I think he had like 750 yards and 8 touchdowns that year.
Yep.
He excelled in that role. And then we saw after that, the year after, they had injuries and they had to keep taking him out of the slot, and he just wasn't as effective. I mean, so if they can simplify Reagor's role, maybe that's the way to salvage it. I don't know. Do you think he'll be here when the season starts?
That's a great question. I see. To me, that all depends on Howie's mindset. You know, Howie held on to Zach Ertz until he just decided to trade. You know, like he could have gotten rid of Zach Ertz a lot earlier and didn't. And I guess hubris might come into play here with whether or not he's going to trade Jalen Reagor. I'm positive he'll get offers, and I'm positive those offers aren't going to knock his socks off, because who wants to give up a lot of value for a guy that is already on his way out and hasn't had 2 good years? But you know, at some point, Howie's got to let common sense prevail here, I think. But I don't know. He's a stubborn guy sometimes.
Is it a situation where, you know, obviously Brown and Smith are the guys, but when OTAs come, I sit down Pascal, Watkins, and Reagor from day one and say, it's you 3 are fighting for snaps in that spot?
Well, if he's here, right, if they're not trading him and he's on the team and out there practicing, I do think that they give him the opportunity to prove himself. I'm sure you'll see him take a few reps on the first team, get some on the second team. He's not going to be like buried behind these rookie free agent receivers that they just signed or anything like that. He's going to get the opportunity to prove it, and we'll see what happens from there.
All right.
Maybe I could see Howie wanting him to, you know, showcase Jalen Reagor all throughout the preseason and the preseason games before then, trying to make a move as they go into the season.
Right. Well, that's something I'm looking forward to. I want to see the receiver group, obviously, this new look receiver group. And one guy makes you new look, right? It's like all of a sudden you got one guy, and that changes the complexion. How does that help? What does it do for Smith? What does it do for Goddard, right? I mean, how does A.J. Brown's presence change everything for those two guys? That's going to be a very interesting thing. That all starts tomorrow with the rookie mini camps at the NovaCare Center, and we'll have that on Football at 4, of course, all next week as well. And this offseason continues where they're going to need. Now, everybody's keeping their eyes on James Bradberry, right?
Yep. I understand why, but just remember, cornerbacks who are good, and he may have had a bad year, but we know he's not a terrible cornerback. He can play, especially if he's in the right scheme. A lot of teams are going to chase after him. The Eagles will not be the only one. I feel like there's this thought that he gets released, he's an Eagle the next day. Well, the Eagles are going to have some competition in getting him, and there are some teams that have probably a little bit more money at the time to deal with than the Eagles do. So this will be an interesting competition.
Well, you know what? Playing in your division against a team that just let you go, maybe that's appealing.
Or maybe playing for a team that's like been in the Super Bowl for the last 3 years and just happens to need a quarterback too, and you get to play with Patrick Mahomes and or some other All-Pro quarterback.
All right, so there's competition out there. He's Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, every day at 4 o'clock right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Check out the latest edition of Inside the Birds over at InsideTheBirds.com. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, back tomorrow with Adam Kaplan here on Football at 4. Thank you, Jeff.
You got it, Mike.
There's Geoff Mosher. He'll be back next week for Football at 4.